Okay, in chapter 2, we looked at describing data, mostly using graphs and tables. And in chapter 3, we're going to move on to describing data using numbers of various types. And in section 3.2, we're looking at numbers that describe the middle or the center of a set of data. And you're probably familiar with some of these measurements of the center of a data set. We've got things like the mean and the median and the mode and the mid-range, which you might not have heard of. But let's start with actually getting some data. So as I record this, it's still a few days before the quarter starts. And so far, 20 people have filled out the pre-survey, where I asked them to pick a random number from 1 to 100. So this is what I've gotten so far. And it's a blob of data, and it's a little bit hard to tell kind of what the middle is or what's the typical number that people are picking. So let's see if we can get some descriptions of this data set. So I know that you are probably pretty familiar with the idea of the mean. And in case you're not, to get the mean, you add all the numbers up and divide by how many numbers you've got. So I've got 20 numbers here, so in this case I would add them all up and say 14 plus 29 plus, and I'm not going to write them all down, but you would get toward the end, you'd say plus 10 plus 2, so you'd add up all 20 numbers, and then you would divide by 20. And in this particular case, that happens to come out to 24.4. And in some way, that is the middle of this set of data. There's some numbers that are less than 24.4, there's some that are more. But that's not the only possibility for measuring the middle. And we'll talk about why we need more than one. But another one you may have heard of is the median. Which is simply the middle number when the numbers are in order from smallest to biggest. So when the numbers are sorted. So let's go ahead and get those data points sorted. So there they are. The smallest number is 1, the biggest number is 85. And when you've got an odd number of data points, you just pick the middle one. For the even number of data points like we have here, it's either the middle number or the average of the middle two numbers. And again, the list has to be in order for you to do that. So the middle two numbers, so halfway through this list, there's 20 numbers. So there's the 10th number and the 11th number. Those are the two middle numbers. And some people are taught to like cross one number off there and cross one number off there and cross one number off there and cross one number off there. And that'll either get you to the middle one or the middle two. So if you like doing that, that's fine. But in our case, the middle two numbers are 16 and 17. So halfway between those is 16.5. But if you're really being formal, you'd add them up and divide by 2 and get 16.5. That's the median, which is actually quite a bit different than the mean. So before we move on to the mode and the mid-range, I just wanted to talk about why those two are different and what they mean. So let's think about if someone had misunderstood the question and instead of writing 85, they had written 85,000 or 85 million, just because that's their favorite number. I'd like you to think about what would happen to the mean in this case here. Let's switch colors. So if that 85,000 was in there now, the mean, I'm not going to work it out, but it'd be huge. right? The total, when you add up all 20 numbers, would be 85 million and a little bit. And you'd divide that by 20 and you'd get something a little bit over 2 million. So the mean really gets drastically influenced by an outlier. The median, on the other hand, those middle two numbers are still 16 and 17. So the median did not change at all. Still 16.5. So one of the reasons we have both the mean and the median is the mean is very sensitive to outliers. And the median's not. Often when you see them report an average house price in Seattle or in Skagit Valley, they'll talk about the median home price just for the same reason, because there is that occasional home, right, that's an $85 million home, and you don't really want that pulling the average way up, because it doesn't really represent the true middle of the data. Okay, so let's get back to the mode. The mode is the one that occurs most often. So it's the most common number or numbers. For our particular list, looking through that, I can see that 10 shows up twice. Yeah, let's do this in a different color. 10 shows up twice. And 23 also shows up twice. No other number shows up more than once. So we have two modes here. This is bimodal data if you want to get fancy about it. So our modes are 10 and 23. And the last one is what's called the mid-range. And the mid-range is really, it's defined by the outliers, it's the biggest, it's the average of the biggest and smallest. So let's say the biggest plus the smallest divided by 2. So in our case, the smallest number is a 1, and the biggest number is an 85. So added up, that's 86 divided by 2, which happens to be 43. So there's the mean, the median, the mode, and the mid-range. The mean is sensitive to outliers. The median is resistant to outliers. The mid-range is entirely defined by the outliers, which makes it generally a pretty bad measure of center. And the mode just kind of ignores the outliers, unless the outlier is the mode. But okay, so these are our 4 measurements of center. Let's take a look at the histogram. So the histogram looks something like this. Let's see, let's get rid of the, there we go. The histogram looks something like this, and let's look at where the various measures of center are at. So the mean was 24.4, so the mean, let's see, we want to be on this one. Sorry, the mean was right there. And when you're looking at a graph, the mean, imagine that all these blue bars are actual, like, I don't know, 2x4s or something nailed to a teeter-totter. The mean's actually the balance point. If that was all an actual physical set of bars and nailed to your teeter-totter, that's where it would balance. The median, on the other hand, let's see, the median was 16.5. So that's, let's see, where are we? There's 0, 5, 10, 15. So the median's more like about right here. And half the blue is above that and half is below. So it's halfway through the blue. It doesn't really care how far out these last few things are. The median doesn't. It just says, hey, there's a couple blue there, a couple blue there, but there's as much blue to the left of the median as there is to the right of the median. The modes are just the ones that showed up most commonly. And I've used bins of width 5 here. I've got a class width of 5, so it's a little bit hard to see the modes because some are getting grouped together and some aren't. And the mid-range is 43, which again is just the average of the highest and the lowest, so it ends up being about here and doesn't really measure the center very well, in my opinion. This homework is going to be a great time to start learning to use statdisk.com. You can probably do the mean, median, mode, mid-range just with the basic calculator that's on your phone, but this would be a good time to practice using StatDisk. So in the next video, we'll look at how to do a couple homework problems using StatDisk.